Okay, go ahead.
It's that time.
Commissioner Barquette,
Here.
Commissioner Duffy is running late. Commissioner Sawyer is absent. Commissioner Stevens. Commissioner Trezza. Vice Chairman Atwater.
Present.
Chairman Griffin is out as well. Currently, you do have 4 commissioners present. It does constitute a quorum.
Fantastic. We'll get rolling here. Okay, I'd like to start with a presentation of the Port Employee Awards. Kirk, you want to do the honors?
Yes, sir. So we have 5 of them. 2 unfortunately aren't here, so I'll read through those. Actually, we'll read through all of them, and then we're going to do pictures?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So the first is Randy Elizondo. He's Port Police officer. He's not available. Years of service, 5 years, hired on February 26th, 2020, into his current position. The next is Evan Medill, who could not make it today. He's Operations Maritime Account Supervisor. He was hired as an ops intern with the 2019 cohort, rehired as a temporary runner for administrative services on March 23rd, 2020, promoted to Ops Clerk 3 on June 21st, 2021, and then promoted to his current position on November 9th, 2020. Next, we have Shafa Rodriguez with 5 years. He is IT Technician 2, hired as an IT intern with the 2019 cohort also. Rehired as temporary IT help desk support on March 23rd, 2020, and then promoted to his current position on January 10th, 2020. Next is Ricardo Navarro with 20 years. Facilities Maintenance and Construction Manager. Hired on February 7th, 2005. As electrician, promoted to assistant superintendent on January 7th, 2013, promoted to facilities maintenance and construction superintendent on October 13th, 2014, and then promoted to his current position on October 5th, 2020. And finally, Maria Perez, also with 20 years, senior accounting technician, hired as accounting technician 1 on January 31st, 2005, promoted to accounting technician 2 on January 31st, 2007, promoted to accounting technician 3 on November 1st, 2012, and then promoted into her current position on November 1st, 2015. So congratulations to everyone. And then we'll do pictures. Shafa, you want to go first?
Where at?
I saw that whenever I see there was a picture.
Right.
Can I get you to slide out, boy?
Congratulations.
Just in time for photos. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Does this work for you?
Thank you. Thank you. One more. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Note the arrival of Commissioner Duffy.
Thank you.
Not as late as he could have been.
That's right. Okay, Next on our agenda is the consent calendar. Do any of the commissioners request removal of any item on the agenda?
Yes, I'd like to discuss number E, but also note that one voice trip, the dates are not accurate on
Correct.
that.
On the revised agenda that was emailed, they're corrected.
Okay.
On that, so you guys just have the,
Okay.
yes. Thank you.
Okay. On the remaining items on the agenda, let's see, where am I here?
Questions? Any public?
Yeah, any questions on any of the remaining items on the agenda? Okay,
Comments?
Should ask if any member of the public would want to remove any.
yes, I was going to. On behalf of the board, are there any public comments on the consent calendar?
Nobody's here.
No comments? Like to call for a motion on the remaining items on the consent calendar?
So moved.
Second by Teresa. Okay. Given that, I call for the question. All in favor of the remaining items on the consent calendar?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? There being none? Okay.
So, yeah, so.
Let's now move to the, let's
Do
now
we wanna
move to
talk
the
about
item
it, or-
removed. Yeah,
Well,
let's-
I
let's
mean,
talk about E.
we discussed it. I mean, I have a couple comments and kind of, I guess, questions. One is, I don't know why we're doing a 3-year deal, right? I mean, normally those are like 1-year deals, and I was concerned that nobody else responded, which tells me it probably wasn't at least put out in a way that enough people saw it, or that it was put out in a way that we're not, I don't know what we're getting. As I read through what they're providing, it almost seems like they're just sending us like legislative updates that you could probably get from the CAPA Legislative Committee. It's not what I would call real lobbying around a planned approach on what's important to the port and what we're trying to accomplish. So I'd like us almost to take a step back and think what we want out of the state and put together a more detailed approach. I do, like, and even if it meant we had to pay more, but I don't think, like I said, it's not that expensive, but I don't think we're getting much, right? We probably get a monthly report of stuff that's, that,
We do, we get weekly updates from them, or probably even more so than weekly. But also anything that we have a state issue with, which there aren't a ton. I mean, most of the stuff we do is federal, it seems like, but any state issues we have, we do go to them. Jeff, you want to?
But we should be leveraging for what we're doing at the state instead of.
True.
So I too couldn't see the value in this, in the fact that they were the only ones to return. I'm
We're not sure why.
not
I
feeling
don't know.
good.
No, and I don't know if Paula has any information on why we only got one response. I wasn't involved in really that side of it. Sorry, she's got a,
I don't know,
My-
I'd be
my-
interested to hear what you say, but I would say we just table it and have like another.
My recommendation, yeah, is to give it a run again and see if we can come back, because
Yeah, that's not a problem, and do we want to look for, you want to just do a year to year, or do you want to just?
I would say we would start on a yearly. Most of the ones that I've seen are a year, and I've been in that field for, a while, but I think it's also important what we're at. That's what
what we're trying to do.
Right, that's the more important question.
So what you're looking for is an advocacy plan before we hire an advocate to represent us in the state, right?
I mean, we don't need,
Definitely have
yes,
more than one bidder.
yeah.
So-
And I know they've been doing it forever, so I think that's
Yeah.
probably why nobody bothers, oh, that's the ports people, and that's the same old thing, so nobody else bothered. But I think to Michael's point, I think we can do better. I think we need to step back and take an approach as to what we really want to accomplish and be more specific in our request, that it's a little bit more, it got to my point as I see our strategic plan people here. I think it's just, we're not thinking big about any of the things that we're doing, and that's just another example of it, just business as usual. And
We resent it out to bid. How long will it take?
How long do we put out to
If
bid
we
for?
reset it and try to get multiple bids, how long is that process?
So the initial process for this particular RFP, it was issued on the 25th publicly, and it was sent out to multiple different distribution locations via email and posted on websites as well. So there was a lot of exposure to that, as well as publicly posted on our website. The turnaround time on that was a 30-day turnaround. It was very quick because we needed to engage with the vendor quickly. The services were, I believe, expiring at the end of this month.
Yeah.
So we needed to get into contract to continue, for continuity of services. So the reason for the 3 to 5 year contract is that is part of our new procurement policy. If we're going to be engaging with consultants for services, we want to engage in long-term, so we don't have to go through the RFP process rigorously year over year over year. We want to thoroughly vet, publicly post these, give a lot of competitors the ability to formally compete through the RFP process as opposed to just renewing a contract year over year. So that is part of our new procurement policy.
So the nature of the work might be different here than the rest of the procurement process, right? Because if you're talking about contracts with an engineering firm, it might be different than your lobbyist firm. And we should look at that.
Correct, and we do issue different RFPs based on the scope of work that we've been provided by the departments. So if we're looking to do a different scope of work for more robust services for advocacy, then it would be a much longer process. I would say probably 3 months tops from start to finish.
And so I'm even more convinced that we should take a step back, because, you know, we said we were gonna vet it and get a bunch of people to compete. Well, we didn't. We got one, right? So we did it in a way that had the same person that we were working on do it, and we gave him a 3-year contract, which, you know, that's gonna take you into a new governor. It's gonna take you into a whole new, people don't do that in that world. They just don't. They don't do it for 3 years, so that would be my recommendation.
Why don't we modify,
can do
look
it
at the
for one.
scope, and then I'll send it out to the group, and then you guys can respond to me individually with any comments, and then we can go from there. Is that, we can extend Gonzalez month
Month
to
to
month.
month, yeah.
For now,
Yeah.
right? We can just amend that. Paula, you're okay? We can just amend that agreement to, until we can get the RFP, because it's gonna take more than the end of this month to get it done.
Yeah, I'm sure.
Okay,
I don't see any problem with that. Do you, month to month? No. That's,
okay.
Do we need a motion to make that a month-to-month contract?
No, I mean,
Okay.
I technically have the authority to do that. So
Yes.
That's what we were talking about. If we just did it a year, we wouldn't even have to go to the board, so I'm glad we did.
I'm glad we did
Yeah.
too, you
Yeah.
know? 'Cause that's I'm glad we did too.
That it?
Thank you. Yes.
That item? Okay, next item, consideration for possible adoption of the framework for the Port of Stockton Strategic Plan.
Shannon?
And we have some presenters here with handouts, I think.
I almost wrapped this and tied it with a bow. I didn't, I held back, but we're very proud. Here you are.
Did that come from,
Came from the port.
yeah, really nice.
Oh, you were. Yep.
Thank you.
I'll keep it for the file.
The real sky?
So remind me, is this public, does this go, or is this an internal working document?
No, this will be, after this now it's public.
Okay. And do you put it up on the website?
It will be, yes.
After this vote, correct?
Do I aim this at something? It's supposed to be just the right arrow, yeah? Okay, there we go. Well, hello, commissioners. It's great to see you again. I'm Shannon Arnold, president of Path Strategy. And with me,
Jessica Lime, strategic planner with PATH.
so today we're presenting on, excuse me, the final framework, which you have in your hand here. So this is hopefully a familiar slide from our last update we provided, although today's a little bit more exciting because it's completed. So on the left, we have an overview of what's in the framework itself, and then on the right, this is the phase that we're in now where we take the framework and move it into action. So we're currently transitioning into building the action plan, but today we're going to be focused primarily on an overview of what's in the completed framework and then provide an update of where we are in the action planning phase today. So this is just a at-a-glance look of what's in the framework. We're not going to be going through page by page, but we're going to take a high-level look at what's inside. But it does have, so last time we gave an update, we gave you just the framework summary at a glance. That was zero fluff, all meat. Today, this is the context that's included to support the framework elements. So there's more descriptions around each of the elements, and then some info on the background, some info on where we're headed, and that's what we're gonna look at today. So these are the key elements that make up the framework. You have the executive summary, which is the at-a-glance spread. So that's familiar territory. You saw that last time. It has the intro, the background, and the process. So that should hopefully answer any questions that anybody has about how the plan was developed, our methodology, who was involved, how we arrived at the conclusions that we did for the content. And the current landscape, which is essentially by the numbers that the port already produces, but a few additions were made to that. So it's really looking at the data landscape, what statistics are out there, what are you measuring currently, and then the actual framework elements. So the vision, the mission, the core values, and then the priority focus areas. There's 4 of those, 10 strategic objectives, and then we end the plan with a look at how we'll transform it from the framework elements and make it actionable and turn it into something that can be implemented. So we'll provide a brief overview of that.
Okay, so this is just an overview of the timeline of the framework and the action plan. So you'll see on here on the left in yellow is the planning phase. So there was an initial planning phase that had happened in terms of developing your mission, vision, and your core values that we weren't a part of. But we came into the fold in 2024, which is the darker color yellow. So that's when the planning phase is concluding, is going to be June of 2025. Your strategic framework will be a 5-year framework that will begin, it will be the fiscal year beginning July of 2025 and ending in June of 2030. So we're looking at those action plans being 1 year at a year-by-year basis, where we'll identify some of those activities that are going to happen within your SMART goals on a year-to-year basis, but some of those goals might be longer term. So we'll be phasing them out over maybe 1, 2, or 3 years within that 5-year framework. So you'll see there we have our first year action plan, but on a yearly basis, you'll be able to track progress through your scorecard, identify if you're meeting all of your milestones within your action plan. And then at the end of 2030, June of 2030, that's when you'll start to look at, do we need to relook at our framework and make adjustments? So that's essentially the framework and action plan timeframe. So our process was to collect data. So we always are trying to ensure that we're engaging with the core individuals that are going to be providing input into the plan. So we held, Shannon had provided 14 interviews with some of the key stakeholders from the executive leadership team as well as commissioners into identifying basically what the current landscape was at the port. That data then informed a SWOT analysis, some high-level SWOT data that we then brought to workshops. We presented that data to staff, and we synthesized and made sense of the data in order to develop those high-level priorities and strategic objectives. So ensuring that it is, an iterative process that you're looking at what is happening at the port, what are your current priorities, and what makes the most sense. We then conducted a force field analysis where you take a look at kind of those key driving and restraining forces that are either helping or hindering you from achieving your vision. So always taking a look at aligning with your vision, your mission, and your core values that were already established with developing those strategic priorities.
I clicked it twice. Let me just check. It is this one. This is a quick look at the current landscape. So a lot of these statistics were from your by the numbers. We made a couple of new additions, but this is included in the framework because it's going to help us as we head into the action plan phase. So we're looking at what info is already an indicator of the port's success, and how does this align with the strategic framework? So there might be further adjustments to what you're looking at in your by the numbers when we enter the action planning phase, but for now, this provides a good amount of context for the average reader to know what is an indicator of the port's overall success. So this is the strategic framework at a glance. You have seen this before. It's been slightly updated. There was one small word change from continuously assessing capacity to continuously assessing infrastructure. So that's the only change there, but otherwise this is included in the plan, so you have a nice at a glance summary of what's included. All of the core elements are right here at a glance with kind of zero fluff around it. So it's really easy to just see it, digest it, but to really understand it, you have to dig deeper into the plan.
So this was the prior vision that was established prior to us coming on board. And the only change that was made to this in the plan itself was aligning with the name Stockton Port District as opposed to the Port of Stockton. So that was adjusted in the vision. And the same with the mission as well. So these are the 6 core values that we are, integrating into our workshops and ensuring that they are aligned. We also have a strategic objective that relates specifically towards implementing the core values as an organization. So always ensuring that we're aligning with, your vision, mission, and core values throughout the process. So these were the 4 priority focus areas that came out of our workshops and through that process of the force field analysis and identifying some of those key driving and restraining forces. So operational efficiency, fiscal sustainability, stakeholder engagement, and infrastructure, with operational efficiency being optimizing your processes through your collaborative planning and innovation, fiscal sustainability, ensuring your long-term economic viability through strategic allocation of resources, stakeholder engagement being both internal and external, so not only your staff, but also your external partners, and really incorporating your core values into that. You can still see it up here.
Okay,
So
yeah.
Infrastructure is the last strategic, or priority focus area, with upgrading infrastructure to support evolving market demands and business needs. So as you'll see, we then, did a series of workshops to identify the strategic objectives that would be a part of the framework as well, that would inform the action plan. So that's where kind of that broad focus area then becomes action, where you're identifying, okay, well, what do you want to achieve over the 5 years? So like leveraging innovative technology, continuous process improvements, developing district-wide plans, implementing a long-range financial plan, implementing your core values and fostering consistent, transparent communication, enhancing alignment and support, modernizing your infrastructure, and continuously assessing infrastructure and proactive infrastructure maintenance strategy. So all of those are essentially your guidepost for your action plan. So now we're taking a look at identifying SMART goals for how, looking at kind of a shorter term time frame for achieving those strategic objectives over the 5-year period.
So this is the phase we're in now. We're moving from the framework to action. How do we achieve this vision that the port has? So we've touched on that in the framework, so that way, as you get to the end of the plan, you're not left with the feeling of how is this going to be implemented? We allude to that by providing an overview of the action plan, a scorecard, and how the framework aligns with other global frameworks that you participate in, such as the Green Marine certification program. So the Green Marine is naturally already aligned with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So we provided a matrix to also show the overlap between the framework elements and the Green Marine. So as you advance through that program, it'll align with certain elements of this plan as well. But the action plan is really the critical roadmap of how what the details will be to carry it from idea to action. And the scorecard is how we'll measure progress each year. So this is an overview of the action plan components. So at the base will be the SMART goals, the goals that are clear, measurable, have clear accountability, are time-stamped, so you know exactly what you're trying to achieve. And each SMART goal is aligned with an objective, a strategic objective. And then the key steps are the tactics that will need to be taken to get that in motion. The accountability lead person, individual, group of individuals who will be held accountable for making sure that progress is being made. That will be identified in the action plan. And then any resources that are available, either resources that are currently available or are needed to get it in motion. For example, it might be a third party, it might be a study, it might be money, it might be time. So those resources will be mapped out too, so you kind of know what you're up against to get each goal completed. Then the really important parts, the key performance indicators. So how you measure, what metrics are you looking at and how are you measuring success? What is really indicating that progress is being made? And any overlap with either other SMART goals or other programs or initiatives like the Green Marine. There could be some significant overlap there with the things you need to achieve to move up in the level there. And then the timelines and the milestones. So our first action plan is focused on 1 year out, so from June 2025 to 2026. But some SMART goals might take longer just naturally. They'll be longer term in nature. So we're going to provide a 5-year timeline at a glance, so you'll still know what you need to achieve that first year. But the next action plan will have to get more detailed to look at the next tier. But you should be able to see at least at a glance of what are these longer term goals that will take longer and what can be achieved still within that 1-year time frame. And then, of course, the scorecard is the final component of the action plan and pretty essential for measuring very clearly if you're on or off track, if a resource is needed, and help you kind of recalibrate or adjust along the way.
Can I ask?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
Can you go back one?
Yeah.
So I understand, so by June of 2025, will you have a 5-year action plan?
A 1 year, but then we'll have like a 5-year timeline, so like a visual. We have a slide that'll kind of show what that'll look like. An example could be like a long-term port-wide or district-wide plan might take multiple years to either get in motion and completed. So it won't be all completed in this 1 year that we're looking at, but we're
Right.
still mapping it out so it exists on our radar.
So that's what I want to know. So it's like, we're not just getting what's going to happen 25 to 26. We're
Yeah.
going to get what the whole 5-year timeline is, even though we're only in year 25, 26.
Yes, but in less detail. So the detail increases for the 1-year action plan, and then the 5-year will be more of like at a glance. A big plan is happening over this 3-year spread, or
Okay.
in year 3, we're going to start this important action that will take about a year. So it'll show you the tiers, but it won't be as
So when does
detailed.
the details of year 2 and year 3 and year 4?
That would have to start after.
So the
does
tactical
that?
plans underneath aren't being introduced right now. You're just doing the broad strokes, and the tactical plans will be introduced year by year?
Yes, we're doing the first tactical action plan now, focused on just the actions that would take place from this June to the next June. And then after that, it's
This
just
year
more
you'll have
effort.
tactical plans. But for the
It's
future
meant
years,
to-
it's
yeah.
just broad strokes overall, and the
Yeah.
tactical plans will be done in
In future
For
iterations, yeah.
execution, yeah.
So figuring out the exact timing of when you would revisit the next
So is
action
it
plan needs
we
to.
revisit, or you guys coming back and
Well, if
revisiting?
we would love to be back if you'll have us.
So we would need to rehire you, though, to come back?
Yes, so
To-
this contract was just focused on the framework and a one-year action plan.
Really? It's only 5 years.
So we should, in essence, be able to pick up, we could choose to use you, but you've given us a framework, and we could choose to do it in-house too.
Yeah, you could. Ideally, you'll have the tools to be able to do it yourself.
That's the key, is
Yeah.
that we have the tools. And then secondly, you have the scorecard as being annually. What's going on a monthly or a quarterly basis to measure, so we know? The last thing I want to know is, oh, it's annual time and we get a look at the measurement now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's an interesting question. It kind of, it's in some way up to the team
So
on
if it's a
how.
feedback loop though, because
Yeah.
that's what it is,
Yeah.
it's feedback for us. It's letting us know whether we're making it or not making
Right.
it. It's a measurement.
Yes.
How are we going to do that annually and actually be able to track our work and understand what's going on from a governance level?
Yeah. I think it will depend on what you're looking at. So the way we have a slide that kind of supports that. Maybe I'll just zip over to that and we can come back to this if we need to. Maybe this
One
is a
thing
good
I wanted to mention about the
representation of that.
action plan is that it's meant to be nimble and adjustable as you go along. So the framework is enduring. You have your framework that, is meant to be a document that you can put onto your website, and people, and all of your action plans will be aligned to that. But your action plan, as you go along, there might be shifts in the economic climate, in the environment, or there might be, you might make expedited progress on something. So it's meant to be something that as you are going along, it's adjustable to meet the needs of the port.
Anthony, you had your hand up for a second?
I did, and I had a question. I don't know if it's going to come up later, but in the process, and Margaret and I were in that one meeting, I became convinced, okay, this is a broad stroke, I get it. And then I realized, okay, no, we need the master plan, right? That was the one thing that struck at me. I think it was under operational efficiency, right?
Yes, and a long-term
And I
plan.
just say that because I don't want to get around from, okay, let's have the big giant plan, then we get down to 4 smaller plans when we know. And Sean was there, I don't see him in the audience, but he told me, oh, no, I can have an RFP out on the master plan in 30 days. Do you remember? You were in the Zoom on that meeting. I was like, okay, are we going to do that? Because that's more of the teeth and the substance of what we're going to be actually doing, right? And
Yeah.
so,
One element, yeah.
yeah, on one of those elements. So is that up there?
So the master plan is like an engineering-heavy study. So that would look at your land use, it would look at your infrastructure. It's different than this, whereas this is looking at other things that are less tangible in a way, like your culture or
Right,
your.
I know, and I know that I'm impatient, but I'm bringing it up because this is great for a broad brush, but we also gotta, I don't want to be 2 years from now waiting for, and in the meantime, we've been doing just business as usual over the
That's not,
next
the
2
intent
years.
is to get the framework adopted
Yeah,
and then start that process. We didn't want to start the process of putting
Beforehand, I
RFP
get
out
that,
for the
yeah.
master plan until we got the framework adopted.
I get
And this
that.
is a
I ju-
port, and the port, we have plans 5 and 10 years out right now that are already ongoing. We have things that we're working on now. They're not so broad brush. Some of these things are already tactical, as Michael said earlier. We're already into tactical steps on certain things, so, it's not like we're gonna start next year.
Yeah.
We have things going on right now that need to be included in the first year plan.
Exactly.
That will work through years 2, 3, 4, and 5.
And those could be formalized in the master plan as well if they're a part of
Right.
that.
I'm not being critical of it, I'm just trying to zero in on what are the next steps to focus in so we get things to look at. So when things are brought to us on these meetings, we see them in the context of what we've already decided is our goals like for the next 5
I think
years.
there's a number of
This-
next steps. The RFP for the master plan is one of those.
Yeah, okay.
Because we'll have to include a project flow chart in the master plan as well for individual components in that, correct?
And a master plan, for example, if that's led by a consultant or multiple consultants on a team, those milestones would be clearly laid out. Then those milestones would be perfect success indicators or performance indicators to use to gauge, are we on or off track? And if you're off track, then, engage with that consultant, figure out what's off, and move that forward. So in some ways, that scorecard will align with something like that has very clear milestones already mapped out. That's most likely how we'll measure success, because we're not trying to measure things unless they're giving value and truly indicating that progress is being made and knowing who's accountable. So other metrics might be included on top of that if they add value, but it won't be like, percent complete or, I don't know, number of surveys issued, unless those surveys you know what I mean? I'm gonna kind of continue through our slides, and then I think we'll answer your questions as we get through these, but, oh my goodness, sorry, this is so sensitive, I just jumped 6 slides ahead. Are you moving it, or am I?
I'm doing it.
Oh, okay. No worries. Okay, so I need to go back another slide. There we go. Okay, yeah, so this one. Okay, so thank you. I was starting to feel like I was Looney Tunes. So we were using a very hands-on iterative process to map out what we were creating, but now we're moving directly to the action plan phase. We're working directly in a document and building that out. So we're looking at moving from goal idea to SMART goal framework. We skipped the slide on what a SMART goal is, but I think you know at this point. And then identifying the next steps, and then next one. So this is what the plan is starting to look like. We simplified it for this slide, but basically it's moving from idea to draft goal, identifying the key action steps. So that could be if it's just the first step that we have visibility on to get it in motion, or if it's clear what the first initial steps are. We're mapping it out as far as we can with the time that we have available. The lead, so that lead is who is the accountable party. The resources, so like I said, this could be time, money, people power. It could be you can handle it in-house, you might need external support, so we're trying to map that out. And then initial ideas around what the performance indicators would be and the timeline. So we're trying to flag if it's year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4, or if it's a 6-month process, if it will take multiple years, if it's a short-term effort, but maybe it doesn't need to be implemented in year 1. So we're trying to place those elements early, and we're doing that for each of the focus areas, and then under each objective category as well. So that's
And you're
kind of
doing
the
that for
framework.
the 5 years? I'm not detailed, but you're doing the.
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
So we're
exactly.
including the detailed action steps. Mostly it's year 1, but then there'll be year 2. This major milestone will be complete year 3.
Okay.
So a lot of the detail will be in the first year, because a lot of times you don't know the detail of the next years until you go through the process.
Next slide, please. Okay, so this is draft. I tried to put it in red, so don't hold anybody to this. This is very much in progress, but I did want to share it with you so that you could kind of see the direction we're going. But everything about this could change. So basically, each element on the left would be a SMART goal in each of those little rectangles, and we're trying to place them on the timeline. So we still have a lot of work to do with at least getting the goals to take shape and have a place on paper. Then when we look at the timeline, we'll say, okay, does this make sense? Do we have capacity to do this? How can we rearrange this to find balance? So we first have to map everything out and see what our cards are, and then we can see how we can rearrange it for that balance and what's realistic. Then on this side, we have the 5 years. So year 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. So this is going to be kind of that higher level at a glance, and then your detail will be each year. So, at some point, once you complete your first year and you start working on your next iteration of the next action plan, you would look at what you have slated for year 2, and I don't know, a month or 2 before that starts, you would map out your other tactical action plan, so you know the steps, so you kind of have your year at a glance. And then maybe you could see your overlap. At the very bottom, there's a timeline of other events. There's only 3 on there for now. There's probably more, but things that you frequently attend or go to, Just kind of see what your year is looking like. If it's a time when a lot of staff is out, that might not make sense to launch a new initiative. You might want to adjust it. So we're trying to get a sense, like a holistic view of what's going on at a glance. And then you would have, like the previous slide shows, you know, more of a matrix where it's more detailed with words, and then this would be like the visual. And then, next slide, please. Then this is the critical element, the scorecard. Same with this, draft. Don't hold anybody to any of these words. This is just it's a concept at this point. What we're thinking is that you would have a status indicator of if something is needing a resource, so that hand is holding either a dollar sign, a person, or time, what's needed. Time, money, people, power. This footstep is if it's in motion, you've been able to take that first step. A red flag is if attention is needed, maybe it's off track, something's missing, something's off, you need to focus on that one. And then the circular symbol would be it's in progress, you're on track, you're in motion, it's right where you want it to be. And then the check mark would be when it's completed. So ideally, close to the end of that year, everything would be checked off. Or maybe it's flagged if it needs a resource, but you should be able to see that at a glance. And then depending on what our metrics are, these progress bars would be different. So like the master plan, it's something with a very clear schedule, would make a lot of sense to just do the quantity of milestones that they've already mapped out, check them off along the way. So that would be really easy. If it's something more complicated like stakeholder engagement, fostering transparent communication, we'll have to figure out what that looks like to gauge, are we on or off track? Maybe it's, you know, I don't know, we're figuring it out, that's the in progress part. So we're in that stage of trying to map these things out, but they're all happening all at once. So Barquette, hopefully that aligns with your vision. Everything's kind of got to happen at the same time so you know what you're dealing with, but.
So are you having challenges with
pieces.
KPIs like we all do? So it's a good time to talk about KPIs for a second though, because those are very hard.
Yeah.
And that's what we look for people to help us with, right? You know, you've sat in rooms with people trying to figure out what KPI actually reflects the work being done.
Yeah.
And that is most paramount to this process.
Yeah.
So what do you do, how do you do that, and what can we expect?
And how do we make it meaningful so you're not
Yes.
tracking something like with stakeholder engagement, you don't you don't want to create extra work, but you want the indicator to be reflective of if we're achieving the objective.
Yes.
So the scorecard should be easy enough to see at a glance, like, okay, this is our priority. Are we aligned with our priority and our objective? Are our metrics helping us measure if we're achieving our core objective that we're really trying to do? And how much progress needs to be made? So then, go back a slide, then hopefully the timeline, we have to do them both kind of at the same time, the timeline and the scorecard, so we can see what we're working with, when we're starting it, when we're trying to finish it, and what's actually measurable about those tactics or actions.
And we're a worldwide business, so you can see that this strategic plan may have just gotten changed in the last few days as a worldwide business because of what is going on worldwide with negotiations regarding tariffs, et cetera. So that could really amend this plan dramatically, quickly, and it could happen monthly. I mean, this could blow over in 60 days, but it could be here for 5 years. We don't know. I have a question for Steve. We're talking about an adoption framework here. We're talking about adopting this framework, recognizing this strategic plan. Does that create a legal obligation for us?
I'm worried that it does, and I call to your attention, I believe, it's pages 37 and 38, and it talks about air quality. You know, there's reported receiving greater attention from environmental groups over approvals. And one of the things they are very concerned about, and one of the most fruitful areas to challenge a project is in air quality. And it's seems as though at page 30, and I just glanced at this document, I've not seen it before, but you are putting a lot of burden on the attorney that represents you on this secret challenge, because it appears by implication, you're accepting the United Nations, whatever, I don't even know, I practice in the area of secret, I don't even know what that is. But a semi-clever petitioner, CEQA lawyer, is gonna turn around and say, well, you've agreed to that standard, and that's the standard you're gonna judge this project. One of the keys in CEQA as a public agency, you have the ability to reject an alternative or mitigation measure if it's infeasible, which includes financial infeasibility. And it's not hard to come up with things that you could do more of that wouldn't make sense for you from a financial point of view. It just doesn't make sense, it's too costly. And it seems like if you've adopted that standard, I think it could be reasonably argued, although incorrectly, I think, that you've given up the right to say that something more environmentally sound from an air quality point of view, even though it's economically infeasible, you are now bound by whatever those two documents are that are mentioned there. That
Economically feasible by us at this time in this location, using this method. I mean, yeah, it could get out
You
there.
may have foreclosed your ability to make that finding and have to do everything the environmental groups say you should do for air quality, even if.
To meet that standard that we
Yeah.
put in our paperwork.
Yeah, yeah.
Could I bring
Could I
everyone's
just-
attention to
so
this really quick, though?
Not to bloviate and sound like a lawyer, but what you're basically doing, in my opinion, is shooting yourself in the foot.
There's a disclaimer that we've added, which could potentially be adjusted to be more robust, but it's on this page here, if that kind of adds a layer of protection, or if that would need to be.
Maybe I'm missing it, but on page 39, we're talking about Green Marine. We've already accepted the,
I'm sorry, look at page 37.
sorry,
I think it's
30,
just the
39,
UN
so-
SDGs that we're trying to work towards. It's not saying,
Well, what I'm getting at here,
But I think the comment is really good. So anything in this document before it's accepted should go through council to make sure we
Yes,
don't
that
shoot
was my
ourselves in the foot. And that's all, I mean,
Council
we don't
has
have
not
to
reviewed
debate it
this.
here. But this needs to be done. It needs to pass through legal counsel before we can take a vote on it.
Yes.
Because last thing I want to do is make an
inadvertently
mistake
create something that, yes,
Yeah, continues to hurt us.
because he just saw it the first time.
No good deed goes unpunished.
Yeah, I was concerned about the legal obligations under the plan, legal review of the plan before we, adoption of the framework and the plan, even with a very fine print disclaimer here, which I'm not sure if that's acceptable.
Well, you can say your plan doesn't count, but it's easier for everyone to understand. Either it counts or it doesn't count.
So if we've accepted the Green Marine criteria, aren't we already putting ourselves at risk? And we've done that for years.
Well, the Green Marine criteria is kind of a different plan, as I understand it. You get a rating from Green Marine as you're making attempts to do things, but as you're participating in Green Marine, you become certified because you're participating,
Right.
not because of what score you get on any particular item, as I understand. Is that correct, Steve?
That's my understanding.
But aren't we binding ourselves to these performance indicators that Green Marine stipulates?
Well, that's another obligation that we may create
Yeah,
with
we-
this plan that we may.
Right. I would just add, I think I'd like to get your comments. My gut is it's not legally binding, but it's surely putting us out there.
Well, you're gonna hear,
It's surely putting us out there, and if we're about to approve a project that doesn't meet that standard, well, maybe we need to take a second look at it. And we have to be able to justify why.
Yes,
The
So I
goal,
don't-
we shouldn't approve
That's
a
right.
project that doesn't meet the standard.
That's right.
That's the whole point of this.
Yeah, I agree with you. That's why,
I don't know.
but
I
it's
don't
not a
even-
legal
I don't
standard.
know what that standard is.
Well-
You know what the United Nations standard is? I don't.
No.
No idea.
I don't either.
I don't know if I want you to be.
I don't either, and I don't know
wanna
how
be
it got
bound by
in there,
that.
but I know the Green Marine is something, and we want to be transparent, and we want to be for the environment, and we want to be a great neighbor, all these things, so.
See, the Green Marine or whatever it's called is one that says, look, if you want to participate in this program, and if you do all these extra things, we'll give you a little certificate.
Right.
But it isn't a standard that every.
After you send us a check.
Yeah, but it's not one where it's a criteria you must meet. It's one if you'd like this recognition, go do these things.
Right, and this says alignment with, this doesn't say.
I think
line,
that's-
You know, it doesn't say,
Yeah.
so we should know what it is, but I don't think it's,
Well.
We're not in Green Marine for recognition.
I've tried over 500 secret
That's
cases.
not why we're doing
and
it.
if I was suing the port, I would say, you're bound by that. You agreed to that, and you're not meeting it, and that's one of the reasons why you're not meeting their part.
I know, and you and I know anybody can sue on anything, right? So
any time.
everybody tries to throw out every argument in the world, right? And so, we've got, so, we're never gonna put forth publicly what we're for if we try to give ourselves an out on everything,
I'm not
you
saying-
know?
I'm just saying that
So-
you should expect that argument.
Yeah, and I think that's
you
fair,
can see
and that's the first I even saw that term either. This has a lot more meat on it than what we saw, Margaret, right? When we, we just, so,
And you mentioned something earlier, time, money, people, power.
Minus power, just time, resources that are needed, time, money, or, people power, yeah.
Yeah, people, power. Is there a comma in between those, or is it people, power? One phrase.
It's one phrase.
But,
Yeah, one phrase.
okay, but we need to make sure that's
an
clearly
icon
understood,
for it?
but I would like
Human
council's,
energy,
I would like
yeah.
council's review before we, I mean, it would feel real good to adopt this today. But as a framework,
A framework you can adopt anytime, because it's saying, this is how we're gonna do our strategic planning. I've got no problem with that, but the actual plan itself needs to be reviewed and vetted by legal before I would act on it,
I
because
think
I
the-
wanna
no,
know.
I think the framework needs to be approved too, because I think you ought to understand the guidelines and framework in that United Nations standard that's included in this framework.
I mean, I
Well-
definitely don't think KPI should be. based
Framework,
on-
I'm not talking about that, though. Framework just means how we're going to strategic plan, rather than what the actual strategic plan is.
We could omit that section, if that makes it easier, then you would just go from implementation, action plan, scorecard, to moving forward. And that page could just come out, and then,
Something like our visions aligned with the UN SDGs, but.
Well, I think we
We
should all
should be
understand
measured
what
on
that
it.
standard is before we say our visions align with it.
What do you mean by that? I mean, what do you mean by the standards? Are you just talking about the UN SDGs?
On 37, 37 is, in my opinion, trouble.
UN SDGs.
so
And
they're
Green Marine
just a set
certification.
of goals that the United Nations has related to global sustainability. And Green Marine, as they develop their program criteria, they align.
I think
with
Green Marine, I think is a little bit more flexible than the UN SDG.
Well, it's saying, so like everyone's trying to meet that 2030 Paris climate thing, and it's all aligned with these 30 SDGs. It's not saying we're gonna meet it, but
Everyone is not trying to meet the SDG.
That's actually,
Everyone's
Not
not
everyone,
trying
but
to
I'm
meet it.
saying-
Actually, there are very few countries that really accept that, and most of the second and third world countries in the world have not.
right, but I'm saying the
Not a part of
ones
this at
who
all.
say they're following the UN SDGs, they pick specific ones. Usually like 3 of them.
The ones that the Green Marine is aligned with is this matrix where they did the study to show if there's a direct or indirect relationship. So we isolated the ones that just relate to ports and put that in here. So it's a portion of the research that Green Marine did and published in their last annual report. So as a participant, you are aligned to this. So we put that in here to show how Green Marine is connected to something even more beyond that. So that's why that's included. So it is just a high-level awareness of Green Marine is in alignment with this set of sustainable development goals in direct and indirect ways. But not every goal is included on there. You'll see several are omitted.
are you concerned with us stating that we have a goal? Or are you concerned that we're adopting an outside agency's goal?
I'm worried that you will have to, if you are not in complete conformity with it, someone will raise that as an objection to approving the environmental document, and you're gonna have to spend time in court explaining why that's not really the case.
So even if it was an internal standard developed by us and put in our plan, you would see the same problem?
This is gonna be a published document.
I know, I got that.
Well, I've never seen this before.
Right. So if we were to set our own standard, and it happens to be one of the same ones
Well,
that's,
if you adopt a policy as a governing body that said, I don't know, that the NOx emissions from a project will be positive, and you then approve a project that isn't, unless you make certain specific findings and get sued, you're probably going to be found that your decision was illegal because you did not conform to law by meeting your own standard.
Hence my concern.
I don't know, did I answer your question? That's
And why would we ever put any standard out there that we're trying to
Well,
meet?
and that's, yeah, I'll just say two things. One, this is a strategic plan framework, not the policy. But I agree with everybody that we shouldn't be putting things about the United Nations, especially in this environment, in our, as the standard. I mean, Trump might pull all our
Silly stuff.
grants because we're being woke for having it in there.
Yeah.
Huh?
it's very,
I
yeah.
mean, I think I think we need to look at, right? Because that's an outside global standard to make sure we're hitting it. But
We're using
this is also a.
but
this is-
Biden could also not award us contracts because we're not meeting the
So,
UN
in the end, we
environmental
have to do what
standard.
we think is right, but I don't think any of us know what
go back and forth.
means,
Yeah.
right?
You know, I'm much more granular. I'm saying someone is gonna walk into court and challenge a project and say, look at page 37. You know, whether it says capital P policy or not, that's what it is. And they didn't meet it, and because they didn't meet it, they couldn't approve the project.
Well, at a certain point, we're gonna have to either start doing what we believe in, or to Kirk's point, not produce anything. And just do everything, and, which I don't think we wanna do. We've decided that we don't wanna do. This is super high level. That term was something we haven't used, but other than that, my complaint about it is it's too high level, right? It's like, it's just, but so somehow that got stuck in there. I'm not sure how that got stuck in as a part of the implementation, but.
So maybe an easy path forward is to omit page 37, 38, and just keep that as an internal resource for when we're working on the goal development and anything that does align with Green Marine as we're developing the SMART goals. We have this as something to reference. But if that was omitted, that's the only section of the plan where that's mentioned.
And that's why we're here today, is to talk about this, right?
But-
Right? And, discussion and asking for public comments in a few moments and things like that. So, may I make a recommendation that we first have our attorney review this, okay? And make recommendations and then come back at the next meeting and have a plan that I think we're looking for a plan that is more action-based with goals rather than something that's more worldwide. I think we need to focus more internally and maybe take out some of those legal commitments that we don't know what they're gonna be, because the UN could change their guidelines next week or next month or next year that would further obligate us beyond what our, what we're able to do. That's my recommendation.
Let's go back.
Well, I don't think that works. I think
Oh,
he
okay,
has to-
that's not working. Okay. I was going to go back to a slide that shows the priority focus areas and maybe back a few more. Back. This one? So, correct me if I'm wrong, but if this global framework alignment is I believe it's the only area that's really external. But this is all specific to the port. So this is not looking at anything extra high level. This is all very specific to what port staff and leadership have determined to be highest priority and an objective that should be achieved in the next 5 years. So this was the core of what came out of all of the facilitated discussions, all of the analysis. So I would yeah, just stand behind that this is port-centric and very specific to you, not tied to.
I mean, and it could
global
just be like
standards.
an action plan that, you know, you try to, again, get recertified by Green Marine in 2 years, and that's like an action. you know,
Continue to work
a
toward
goal.
our,
SMART goal?
Yes.
our internal environmental goals.
Yes.
Would that be something we could say?
Well, I think it would be more like under stakeholder engagement. You would see under their Green Marine categories for community and there's 2 categories. Jeff, help me, I'm missing the words here. But there's a community engagement section and a public relations section. And you're already level 5 in each of those categories, but you are committed as part of that program to showing incremental annual improvements. And there's a couple KPIs that say you need to clearly identify who your stakeholders are and understand what they care about. So under these 2, I could see there being SMART goals that directly overlap with Green Marine criteria because they support your incremental improvements. They also change the criteria from time to time. But mapping out your stakeholders and knowing what they care about and enhancing that alignment, I could see totally relating perfectly to what Green Marine requires and what you're striving to achieve here. So I think that would be a good example. But getting certified, I feel like that's almost easy for you at this point because your programs are so advanced. You have that on lock.
I think that one page just caught us off track, right? Because it got specific. If you look at what you have there, develop district-wide plans. When we go to do that, we'll put the more detail into it, and that's where we'll talk about if we're gonna meet this standard or not meet this standard.
Right, this is the
But we don't-
strat plan. This
That's
is
right,
the
we don't
level
need to
that we
talk
should be
about
dealing
it
with.
now, whether or
Right.
not we're meeting the
Action
standard.
plans are what staff should be dealing with.
Yeah.
This is what we need alignment with staff so they can do it. Detail should not be in there to that point. This is what's disclosable to the public. This is our vision becoming action, which is great. I got no problem with any of this high-level stuff. I would have problems with us assigning a standard from another organization to us until it's checked out legally. I do have a problem adopting a plan that hasn't been checked out by council. Those things I've got to, but this, the work, the framework to do strategic planning, taking it into business planning, I've got no problem with the overall goals, no problem with the strategic, everything's right there. It's that next level down.
The action
and
plan.
then measurements up to the governance body.
Yes.
There has to be measurements up to the governance body, or else none of this is worth anything to me.
So maybe that's something to consider too as we're
So
developing.
why don't we
the
pull
metrics.
that? Why don't we pull 37, 38, run it through Steve, and then just look for adoption next meeting without another presentation, don't worry. So-
But maybe
Happy to
let
do
Steve run out the whole thing, so if he sees something else, not just the 2 pages.
No, I'm saying get rid of the 2 pages, because that sounds like
No,
something for
but
this
then
we
review
don't
the
need.
entire balance
Yes.
of the document, just to
we're on
make
the
sure.
same page.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't think you're gonna have a problem with the rest of it. I mean, it's just, you know, you look at.
But still,
I won't, Steve, but you might.
Yeah, but, I
That's
mean,
what you get paid for, right?
Yeah, when you look at 37 in bold and in the largest font, it says the action plan and scorecard will align with relevant global frameworks.
Yeah.
That makes me nervous.
okay, so do we have a motion from a board member? Or are we just gonna table it?
We're just gonna table it.
Okay,
Yeah.
great.
So let's take, Shannon, we'll take those 2 pages out, and Steve, you can review it, and then we'll adopt it next meeting.
I'm gonna call a quick break for me.
Were you
Okay.
guys finished? I know there was
Yeah, I
more,
think
and
the-
The power
Sorry,
of
I'm
the
sorry, Dave.
chair. Yes, I need to go. I'll be right back.
I'll be right back.
Yeah, I think after,
Hold
after
that thought.
scorecard, yeah,
Right there, yeah.
that's it, so.
Oh, it got shifted a bit.
Time to go.
different chairman.
Just, well, the last,
See ya.
after the scorecard, one more, there you go.
Oh, yeah, the content shifted.
Yeah, it shifted a bit.
That's weird, okay. So
This was me.
Yeah, that's weird why it's up there.
So this is where the framework goes into tactics and an actionable plan that you can now take forward. Okay, so how are you going to achieve the strategic objectives? Through SMART goals that are being identified. And we're having those conversations right now. Who's going to be doing what, by when, how is that going to
Oh,
be
do we need to
measured?
wait? We need to wait fully, yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, because I think we're just on break. Okay.
Chair, stop action.
It's a fine day.
Sure. As long as you don't have a weather plan.
Couldn't get the information from Noah anyway.
I don't know why that. It's just basically June this year.
Okay, I see.
Everything else.
Okay.
Explain that, yeah.
That's just my Apple one, though, not my other one.
Well thought out administration.
I'm gonna get my
No.
water.
Okay, no, and I agree with that. At first I was not, I was like, well, we can be aligned with it, but now I get it. So now I'm like, why don't we just say, did you see this? So she, Elizabeth wrote this, however, she said, your 7 Berkeley engineering students are doing a research project reducing the pollution in Stockton, and these are the topics they're addressing.
Are we ready to start again? Sorry.
We sure are.
Sorry for the interruption.
That's okay. Yeah, it's just the final wrap up. Yeah, go ahead.
What I was starting to say is that essentially this is where the framework gets put into action. So now we're starting the process of identifying what those SMART goals are in terms of determining what's going to be done by when, by whom, and how it's going to be measured. And looking at it in that first year, but also identifying the timeline out and phasing it if it's needed. So we're looking at March to April for the SMART goal development. So we're having a series of action planning meetings going through the framework elements and all of the goal ideas that were identified in our workshops in order to make those SMART. And then we'll be finalizing the SMART goals and KPIs somewhere in April to May. And then development of the draft action plan and scorecard from May to June. So that will be the draft. And then finalizing that action plan and concluding the strategic plan project in June.
Okay, so I just have one question. So those 4 things, is that for the whole port, or is that for operational efficiency, fiscal sustainability, stakeholder, so there's,
Yeah, it's for the framework, yeah. It's
In a
gonna
way,
align-
it's yes to both because
Yes to both.
It's both.
but is it gonna put out that scorecard for all 4 of those, or is it gonna be, okay?
yeah. So ideally, actually, could you jump back to the scorecard slide, just one back? So ideally, this scorecard will show you your focus area, your objective, and then there will be supporting metrics. So maybe one strategic objective could have multiple goals related to it, depending on how complex it is. Then each of those goals would have its own line and its own metric, and then its own status and progress bar. So this is all still conceptual, what's on the screen, but ideally you would be able to see how it relates. So yes, it's port-wide, and yes, it aligns to strategic objectives because this is the portion of our focus as determined by the process.
And you know what's great too? It's going to help when we do the director's performance and stuff, because now we legitimately have something to base it off of, quantitative.
I have a whole new set of thoughts on that, so let's not bring that in right now.
No, I know, don't worry. It's just that
That was my whole set of thoughts.
It's nice to have something to see where they are each year on the scorecard. I think that's great. I love the scorecard.
This is.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. This is just, very much a raw starting point, but some areas will be potentially more robust if there's more goals related to them, or they'll be quite simple. And then how they're measured, this could look a number of different ways, but it's simplified here just to show that's what we're ultimately going to look at, either a series of milestones or % complete in some way. We'll have to make sure it makes sense, but certainly if there's ideas about what metrics are important,
So like
we'll figure out a pathway to.
progress bars could also be project flow chart progress.
Progress bars could be
Par-
project flow chart. Yeah, so like a Gantt chart for a master plan, you're saying could be
Because you can have
maybe wrap my head
projects in
around
all
what you're
kinds of
saying.
things. You can have projects in personnel, you can have projects in where a group within this is headed. Rather than just saying, oh, here's a progress bar, you're getting here or there, but there's breakdowns of all kinds of participation in all those different, goals,
I think
right? And
as
the people,
long as it
and the people
makes-
involved in those goals?
I think as long as it's tied directly to indicating if this objective is being met. That's what we're trying to measure, is are we on track for the objective? And then the goal is a breakdown of how you get to achieving that objective. So that's where you might have multiple line items, and that's where your status, some things might not be in motion. Your first step won't be able to take place until you have a resource like a consultant selected, or the budget approved, or a staff member hired for that action, or
That would be the
something.
project
There
flow
might be
chart.
something that needs to come before something else
Exactly.
in the plan, so that's why we're trying
That
to.
wouldn't be the goal, that would be the project flow chart and the steps that are involved in that.
Sure, yeah, so this, I mean, this ultimately, that's why I kind of said, like, this could change completely. It could end up being more like a Gantt chart, but I don't know, something like this makes sense to me. I'm more like, I don't know.
like it.
This just makes sense to me, yeah, to look at. So, but we could look at other ways of measuring it. But yeah, I feel like the granular detail that you're talking about might be taking this a step farther. So there might be maybe another one-page Gantt chart that supports that goal that's managed by a certain staff member or accountable party, and not your at-a-glance scorecard.
Because goal implies completion, right?
Goal is, we could go to the SMART goal slide, but it's,
of goals.
it's very specific.
Our goal
Everybody's
is
got
start
lots
the
of
goals.
plan, our goal,
Everybody's got lots
so we
of
have lots
goals.
of goals
Yeah.
You have lots of
within,
goals,
within
lots
each
of goals.
project,
Yep, within each objective.
within each
category,
objective,
yeah.
sorry. I'm trying to
Yeah.
adopt your terminology here.
Sure, sure.
So a measurement for the overall objective, are you coming up with measurements for the overall objective? Not the process to get to the overall objective, but to measure whether the outcomes from that overall objective are being met.
We're measuring the ability for each goal, which would be like, so the target metrics will have to be, so there might be another column that needs to be added here for the goal that's related to the strategic objective. But ultimately, we're measuring the progress towards achieving the objective, because that's the higher level we're trying to achieve enhanced alignment and support. So how will you achieve that with your stakeholders? There's probably going to be a series of goals, or implementing the core values. You can't do that necessarily in one goal. You won't get enough detail. So,
So I'm honing in there on the key performance
Yeah.
indicator that would actually say that we're nailing it
Yeah.
here, which is different than the goal. What you're talking about right now is more of specific tactical goals underneath of that.
so that would probably be a slide back, one more back. That would be more of, one more back. The actual plan, where the final plan probably won't have goal ideas, but this is just the stage right now where we're going from idea to clearly defined, but where it will have what your goal is, the key steps that need to happen. So if this is Portwood Master Plan, it's gonna be draft the RFP, select a consultant, and then their series of milestones because they're managing the project. And then your lead would be whoever's accountable for managing that consultant or group of consultants. Your resources would be the people who are managing, the money, costs, et cetera. And then the KPIs would probably be the milestones mapped out. So that's an easier example of how to,
Those are milestones, but I'm actually, the output. So if fiscal sustainability
sure.
is our overall strategic goal, how are we know we have several tasks that will happen every year. We know that they'll be broken down into, okay, I'm talking top line there.
Yeah.
What are we gonna see on the measurement of fiscal sustainability besides our completion? What is the quality measure at the end to say we're doing this and we're nailing it?
I love this. We should have brought our sticky wall. We're turning this into a workshop. I'm teasing a little bit, but that's important conversations that need to be had, and that's the stage that we're at. So I don't have a direct answer for
Okay,
you,
that's
but
all. It's in the plan to do that. You don't have that here, it's not represented.
Nope, the framework's done, we're in the action planning phase. Yeah.
And just for clarity, we have meetings set internally. We're going to continue on with the action plan and
Yep. The next
determine
one is in
metrics,
2
even though
days.
the framework's not approved.
I think you guys are doing a good
We're
job.
going to keep
I think
pressing forward,
you're
even
just
though,
doing a
this
good
isn't
job. I
adopted.
think you
There's no
guys are doing
reason
a
not
good
to.
job.
Yeah,
Thank you.
This is just.
Yeah.
You've come a long way.
keep going,
Yeah,
because there's way
exactly.
more detail that's
Yeah.
more
Right,
important to
right.
me than,
Yes.
Yep,
huh?
yeah,
Yeah.
agreed.
Okay, so we omit page 37, 38. We continue with our action planning phase. We're moving in this direction. Any other issues or questions or comments or things to consider as we move in this direction of action planning? It sounds like there might be some ideas about metrics that want to be shared, so maybe that's,
And the meetings are wide open to you guys too. if
I
you
know,
wanna come.
my only big,
Three of
big,
us.
yeah.
Whoever, I mean, at least 3 of you, yeah, or only 3 of you, I'm sorry.
Only 3.
Hey, I could more than
Step
happy
out.
to step aside. This was a snapshot of why these things get me agitated, right? Because everybody has a different definition of one of these words, and, we get caught off on having a different meaning for stuff. That's why I like more specificity. My only comment is that one I've made at the workshop, is I want us to not get away from some of these bigger ideas, right? And I want to and I'm not sure how they get into it. I was told, oh, that'll be in the master plan, or that'll be in, the different roadmap or something. And so that's my overall comment, that if we want a strategic plan, and how do we make sure that we're going to be operationally efficient, or fiscal sustainability, or our infrastructure, we might have to take on some big idea projects. And it doesn't show up here. Everybody told me, no, it shows up in growth and innovation. That's where it shows up. And then, okay, and then we'll get to that later. So that's my only comment that I make here publicly and stuff, that I want us to, at least from my standpoint, I want us to, and that may be in the master plan, or maybe in some other things, but not be afraid to put some bigger ideas for the board's
BHAG.
future out there. Some bigger ideas.
okay.
Okay,
So-
do we want, just for, I guess, logistical, next meeting, do we want this to be an agenda item, or do you want to consent if we've seen Steve's comments beforehand? How should we?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I would be afraid to have it on consent.
If the
myself.
answer, if the questions have already been answered, that's what
Yeah.
if he's already reviewed, I mean, do we
So my
want
question
to?
is, did we plan out any education sessions for us? Because all of this kind of stuff that we're doing in the meeting could have taken place in education sessions, right? I mean, so I've been receiving materials, right? Just those of us not on the committee, and we're here towards the end of this, right? And you're asking for action. I really thought we'd have an education session or something to read us into whatever we needed to be read into.
This is it, I think.
This is it?
Yeah.
Okay, that's how we're doing it.
Yeah.
There's no inoculation, there's no,
Well, I mean, if we want to bring in three commissioners at a time, we can do that, but.
Is you, under the Brown Act, you can't have more than 3 people meet, even if they're just listening and not talking.
right.
But there's no
Educational
reason
sessions.
you could not have a special session called a workshop on strategic plan or whatever, as long as it was followed the rules of notice. And it would be a non-action item, and you would just have this sort of a discussion, and then, you'd allow for public comment, and treat it like an ordinary meeting with a single item, where you're not taking action. You could.
Not at all what I was talking about, but thank you.
That's how you would do it. You could not have a private session with the 7 of you talking about it.
No,
But you
not
could
at
do it
all.
publicly.
Not more than 3.
Yeah.
3 is the rule. Education session, never more than 3.
Okay.
I wouldn't mind Kirk's comment. He says, we get Steve's review, and there's maybe no other things that step out at him. I wouldn't mind it being on the consent calendar next time, but I think probably it should be a separate item for approval on the calendar, but, so it allows for some public discussion, because we've tabled the item for now, so we don't have an opportunity for public discussion.
Well, I was gonna, since it was noticed as a public item, and there may be members of the public here who did want to speak about it, and it's completely your prerogative as the chair, but you could offer to let people speak if they want to, if they're here and they came and attended the meeting, but that's completely up to you as the chairman.
And to that point, our chairman's not even here, and another member is not even here. That's why I said by him, you know, supposing that, you know, oh, we're just gonna put it on the consent calendar. I mean, as long as it's gonna happen, what's gonna happen, I don't think there's gonna be a big discussion on it. You know, we've had meetings on the item that take 5 minutes or stuff like this that takes over an hour, you know, so it doesn't matter to me, but I just think that putting it on the consent calendar is a little disrespectful to the other two commissioners who aren't even here, who haven't had a chance to comment on it, and so, that's my only point.
Doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
I don't know why.
Yeah,
Doesn't
Okay.
feel right.
yeah, doesn't.
Any other comments from our consulting firm?
I think we covered everything. As long as everybody's on the same page, then it sounds like we'll just stay tuned. We'll remove the
Well,
section.
wait, let's talk about that, because we want them to stay on track, too.
Yes.
So, what is it we're waiting for? Steve's gonna review.
We're not gonna wait for
We're
anything
not, we're
internally.
not waiting.
Yeah, everything else is progressing as scheduled. We're just not adopting the framework publicly at this time.
Perfect.
But we're
Okay.
still working on the project. We're not throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Perfect.
So we're gonna keep going, and I would suggest the consulting firm that maybe in the meantime, because somebody mentioned something about, okay, once this framework's adopted and we get our first set of goals out, you guys are done, which is end of June, you guys are kind of done. You may want to put some thought into what,
I don't think that's accurate. I don't think you
What?
guys are done at the end of June.
well, somebody said, yeah, we're obligated
like,
through
yeah.
June, and then you can
Okay,
use
favorite.
somebody else. They said, then you can use us or somebody else to,
We should have the tools internally to
Yeah.
progress with our year 2, year 3, year 4, but
Once you showed the 5-year thing, I get it a lot better now.
Sure,
when I saw it
yeah.
Visually.
But it's sort of impossible to do at the timeline of between March and June, create 5 tactical action plans for each year. So we're doing the 5 at a glance, but to get that level of detail and specificity, there's just so many unknowns that just you.
Resource, huh?
Yeah. But with the first year, you should, and like I said, a lot of those things will shift around, so some might need to be kicked to year 2, or some things from year 2 could be moved in, but we need to see all the cards before we can see how that is gonna shuffle. So that's the first step. So that might be a good opportunity too for commissioners to weigh in if they wanted to, once the timeline is a little more mapped, possibly. I don't know, that's up to you how you'd like to kind of work together with that.
well,
but-
I was throwing a bone toward you, and I wanted to say, okay, you can plan out how maybe your continued engagement may go through the latter stages of adopting this framework and the initial goals.
Well, we'll always be happy to support you as you implement this, but ideally, we'll give you the tools that you need to carry this on without us, but of course, happy to help.
Okay?
That's an
and-
implementation software, is that what you're talking about?
Software, I mean, there's technology as a category, but this would be implemented by your team.
So we'll create our own.
I don't think
Software.
not necessarily. Your scorecard should be simple enough, and then your plan would be simple enough. So this will basically be a metric, like, there would be lines beneath each of these with the details. I just didn't include it in the slide because we're in that stage, it's too messy.
Are you
So-
gonna give us the icon package, though? Want to flip?
Certainly, it's all yours.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any more questions or thoughts?
I think as long as we're on the same page, you like the direction of this action plan, we're gonna keep moving towards that by June. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good job.
Mr. Chair, I have one other thing.
Yes.
I'll do the analysis, I'm pleased to do that, but you should always keep in mind, I'm looking at it from a very narrow point of view, just a lawyer. And you're the governing body, and you have broader concerns. So, you may look at it and say, gee, Steve, that was a great analysis, but as a governing body, we're going to assume that risk. So
that could happen.
that could happen, and that's understandable. But at least you have all the information to decide which way you want to go and how much risk you want to accept, so.
I don't know if I have a path to discover what all the UN environmental requirements are worldwide in the Paris Accords, which the United States just withdrew from.
That page is removed, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
So we can.
That's out. All right, do we get a photo now, or? No.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 7.
Okay, Jason's not here, so I'm gonna do this one. This is to, not award the MPSA, but to extend it, so do the final year. Shafa, do we have slides for this? Thanks. So back in February 21st of '23, we awarded Resolution 8365 to Brockman and Woody for just over $1.4 million. Basically, what they do, the electrical utility service on the West Complex is port-owned and operated, the distribution center, so they provide all the ongoing maintenance for this. So this is just extending that contract. So we're looking for a one-year extension through March 23rd of '26, in the amount of $1,610,899.66. Shafa, can you go to, basically, we'll just get to the meat of it. The next page, yeah. So the annual base support charge of $331,000 is something that we will see. So that's 21% of the contract that we will see. That's a hard number, and that is for routine maintenance, electrical fiber, root materials, equipment, things like that. When we look at the category 2 and 3, the annual labor cost over basis, that is for transformer replacement, switch repairs, replacement pole work, things like that, that we may or may not have. So that 65%, just over 1 million, we're not going to see that unless we ask for that work to be done. So the only hard cost in this is that 331,000. So does that make sense? Yeah. So we will see, we will see some cost of category 2, but we don't know to what
What
extent
did we
yet.
experience last year?
We were at
5 million? Am I looking at that right?
788,000, I'm sorry, last year 980,000, just over 980,000 last year,
On that item number 2.
on the whole contract.
whole con-
There it
On the
is
whole
right there.
contract, Yep.
Annual expense, 980,841.
And then category 3 is they keep a complement of repair trucks and things on site. So we're only getting charged for that when we use it. So of the 1.6, we can expect, we hope that we can expect somewhere in this vicinity. We've seen about a 3 to 5% increase in cost per year for their labor costs primarily. So really, this is just authorizing the last year option, and then it'll go out to RFP next year.
So if there is a big expense, a $400,000 single expense, does that come back to the board, or are we just include it in this?
It's included in this, that's the whole point. If we have something that's the short
We
term,
can just jump on it.
we can just do it, so we don't have to come back to the board and not waste the time, but
But this
delay.
is not necessarily a not-to-exceed number, because something else we could have a,
It's a not to exceed. If it goes beyond the 1.6, the contracted amount, then we come back to
it
the
would come
board.
back to the board. Yes, that's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
yeah.
Any questions?
Any more questions? Motion to approve?
Nope, public comments.
No, public comments, sorry. Public comments on item 7 on the agenda?
None online.
None online? Okay, there being no public comments, do I hear a motion to approve?
Move. Second.
Any other questions? Okay, I'm calling, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Okay, committee reports. Anthony?
Nope.
Michael?
Budget Committee, looking forward to the work. What's our deadline to have budget done?
I believe we're meeting next month.
Deadline is June?
Yes.
Yeah. So, I'm feeling a little panicked right now. to
A
give it the-
little short there? We're a little short
on
there?
time.
Yeah, a little short on
So
time.
I'm encouraging that we get an early start to it.
I think
But
I'm
we're not
on,
early anymore.
I think I'm on that committee, and yeah, we're not early, now it's April.
So we have new books, or we have new setups, we have new technology, and we really want to know where we are from last year. So a lot of work to be done, and need to get started.
So could we get some, for those on the committee, could we get a mailer so we can sorry, I print everything out so we could start studying stuff before we start meeting?
Probably have an initial meeting, get what we want, start studying, but initial meeting immediately.
Yeah.
The plan is to have a document ready 2 weeks prior to the first ad hoc committee, so you'll have ample time to review.
Would you guys like a pre-meeting, though? That's the
Yes.
impression I'm getting.
Yeah?
Yes.
Work with Melanie, and we'll get that squared away. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Okay. Bill, any committee report from you?
No committee.
Margaret?
We have the director's performance, and we are bringing on a consultant, right? And we are gonna have that on time before the end of the fiscal year. That's our goal.
That's on, it's on tape.
And,
That's our
and you
goal.
would, you would include that as, part of that as the contract renewal, discussion?
Yes.
Are you saying you're gonna have the performance evaluation done by the end of the year, or just the contract renewal?
We're hoping for both.
Both.
Okay. Okay, that's awesome.
I mean, that's right, yeah, that is definitely our goal,
Yeah, that'd be great.
yeah,
They don't want to leave you hanging,
right.
there, boss.
No, that would be great.
That would be good. Okay, port director's comments.
Just one. So unfortunately, last week, we lost one of our canine dogs, Barney. So he worked for the port from May 2017 until his passing on April 3rd of 2025. So he was an explosive ordnance dog. He was used by the county quite a bit.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how many calls he went out on per year, but quite a few. I know we got a lot of calls last year for school bombs and things like this. So he was a very dedicated, great dog, and unfortunately he passed away last week. So
Do we have a replacement?
Yeah.
we're working on it. Yep.
But it's a great asset to have.
Yeah, it's a process. I mean, obviously, they're highly trained
Yeah,
dogs, so.
and the whole region gets use out of this. This is another way in which the port has something that they're doing that the whole region benefits from.
Correct. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
I have a question. Do you have any comments or anything you want to share with us about the mayor's press conference and all the stuff about the shipbuilding and what's
You
happening?
didn't watch the news or read the
You
Chronicle?
did a great job.
I did, you did.
You did a great job. I know that it was.
Yeah, I mean, it was a bit of a surprise, obviously. I think it's a great concept. My thought process on that is if they're looking to build something in the Rio Vista area, it's a 20-year project. And the environmental concerns and the dredging and all that is not realistic. Doing something here is going to be time, it's going to take a lot of time also.
Yeah.
I think, but it would be nice to see something concrete so we
Yeah.
can at least
I
talk about a plan.
bring it
so.
up just to say, if possible, it'd be nice to have like a one-page cheat sheet for when everybody goes back for COG, to have whatever, any kind of specificity in terms of why we are
Best place.
the best place to do it, right? And some of the things about, anything that's in the positive light, 1 or 2 page little thing that, because there's gonna be a few of us going back. I know all the cities going back. I hear they're trying to get meetings with various people in the administration.
And I've talked with the mayor about that, at joining those meetings, and we're on the same page, so.
You need specificity, though, is what I'm saying. That's been my thing, is that we're at a certain point to be credible, we need to say, hey, here's the 10 reasons why we are a legitimate place
And that's
to
not
do
a
it.
problem.
Yeah, okay.
I saw Garamendi was kind of cheering up Mare Island also.
Yeah, but he's pushing for this as well, so I have a meeting with him when we're there.
Yeah.
He wants to get together and whatever commissioners.
It'd be great, I think it's great. I'm glad she did it and put her hat in the ring, but
I agree,
it's time we
yeah.
put a little bit more meat on the bone, you know? That's why we,
Yeah, and I've asked her for just more coordination, and
Yeah.
she's very willing, so she's.
Perfect.
Yeah, very easy to work with.
That's good.
Any other comments, Director? Okay, commission comments? Anthony? None?
Nope.
Bill?
I do have one. I went and visited the edible schoolyard, which is unbelievable.
The what?
The edible schoolyard, it's just a couple blocks from here. It's in Boggs Track. They have 5 acres. I think they're only really using like maybe 2 or 3 acres of it. The port gives it to them for $1 a year. And so people in the community can pay $60 for a year. They go in and they get a huge plot that I would say is at least double this table. And they can grow their own vegetables and everything.
It is big.
And then, every Wednesday, they pass out 130 bags of produce. And people line up, so we were there on a Wednesday, cars line up, and they get a free bag of produce, fresh. I mean, it is unbelievable. And it actually, I don't know, this is the port thing to do, but the young man who's the executive director, I'd like him to get the word out, because there's so many farming families
Yeah.
that would contribute to that and everything. It's great for the neighborhood, it's
Yeah.
great for the community. I bet so many people in Stockton don't even know it exists.
Yeah, that's a great idea, especially if it's
Yes.
if only 2 of the 5 acres are being utilized. I
Right,
mean, or get the
and-
4-H program or something.
Yeah,
like
and they
that.
do, they have a lot of field trips coming through and everything. They're part of a larger organization that's run by Alice Waters, founded it,
Right.
Champaigny.
Yeah.
And they have one in Berkeley, one in Oakland, and then one in Stockton.
Yeah,
And it's unbelievable.
yeah.
It was a
I know how
highlight.
much you can grow with an area the size, double the size of this table, because when I was growing up, my job was to grow all the family's vegetables on an area not much bigger than this table.
Yeah,
And I produced a lot of stuff.
it's really impressive.
Yeah, gave away the rest to neighbors, too.
Mm-hmm.
It was a struggling neighborhood.
Did they show you the orchard side, or?
So we did, they gave us a whole tour.
Yeah, the orchard side's the
Yeah,
newest
and met
stuff,
some of the
that's where it's
farmers.
at.
It was all women, actually, out there. Then one young man who's the executive director, I think he's been there for a year. There's so much opportunity to get the word out and just have like, local farmers helping out and stuff. Pretty incredible. A great promotional piece, too.
It'd be nice to make that part of our marketing. Yeah, okay, good. Are there any public comments on non-agenda items?
Yes. Rita Frost again. I am again writing to ask the commissioners to agendize GSNR's wood pellet project and invite scientists to speak. Secondly, we request a joint meeting with the port staff and local partners to discuss comments the Port of Stockton submitted on the project. In early 2024, GSNR signed an MOU with the controversial multinational energy corporation Drax. Not only does Drax have a proven track record of exacerbating climate change, harming rural communities, and devastating forest ecosystems throughout North America, they most recently have cropped up in the news due to an unfair dismissal case around whistleblowing on Drax's greenwashing. At the height of Drax's public exposure for using wood from Canadian old-growth forest, Roa Amir was hired. What she found was a level of chaos never seen before. When an internal investigation confirmed the BBC Panorama reporting, Ms. Amar claims her whistleblowing led to her unfair dismissal. While this case plays out in court, it is clear that Port of Stockton, as well as its workers, should carefully consider working with GSNR and Drax, who have both demonstrated a lack of care for laborers. As a reminder, GSNR opposed the prevailing wage bill in 2022, illustrating they aren't serious about supporting good-paying jobs. Thank you for your consideration, and we look forward to hearing from you. This is from Mary Elizabeth. I recall a lesson I learned from Dr. Jeffrey Mount about resilience, resiliency needs to be an essential focus at time for our community. The port will be impacted by these times of imposing tariff and resultant tariff responses from our overseas markets. Resiliency requires consideration of needs and wants, and I appreciate the consideration of a strategic plan and sharing of goals and values with the public. I hope in the next couple of months that the Port Commission will hold a meeting during which coalition scientists can present some more of the potential impacts and deficiencies in the GSNR CEQA document that, if implemented, would increase greenhouse gas emissions because there were insufficient mitigation measures and which are required for other projects across our state. Trees are a vital part of climate change resiliency. Also, I received notice of a UC Berkeley project that may be of interest. I have seen some of their prior years' analyses, and they do a good job summarizing important information for our community. There's a date which you all received and that just says the topics, which are shipping emissions, wood pellet project, air quality monitoring, air quality data access, traffic emissions, Highway 4 pesticide applications, Stanislaus County, indoor air filtration. The students are working hard this semester, and your presence will be a meaningful part of their learning experience. So those are all that I have.
Any other public comments? Okay. We will now go into closed session. In accordance with the Ralph M. Brown Act, an executive session will be conducted pursuant to Government Code 54956.8.
In 1845, when Charles Weber acquired a 49,000-acre parcel from his luckless business partner in exchange for paying off his grocery bill, he couldn't have anticipated what awaited him 3 years later.
During the gold rush, Argonauts could come to Stockton en route to what were known as the southern mines. But the principal artery for transportation and the fastest way to travel was via water.
There was no Stockton in those early days. There was Charles Weber's tent town on the San Joaquin River that served as a jumping-off point for the gold fields.
He realized that the San Joaquin River was going to be the principal aid in developing his city, and Charles Weber was able to attract enough business people to establish hotels and restaurants and freight companies, and they would cater to the wants and needs of the miners. Those who did not make their fortune, in many instances, had been farmers in their previous lives. And coming back into Stockton or Sacramento, took a look around the Central Valley and realized there was great agricultural potential.
We're in San Joaquin County. This is the most productive agricultural area really in the world. You grow corn, wheat, almonds, walnuts, fruit, a whole host of different commodities feeding the world. You couldn't have the unique agricultural environment we have without the river. That is what allowed this state to turn from a gold mining state, if you will, to a food state.
California's Central Valley is blessed with the best soil there is. Back then, the problem was less about growing the food than it was getting it to market. Without a statewide railroad system or even decent roads, Stockton was in a strategic position to be a hub, connecting the valley by river to San Francisco.
From gold rush days, riverboats carried passengers and cargo on a daily basis between Stockton, Sacramento, and San Francisco.
With the Central Pacific Railroad's completion of a branch line in 1869, connecting Stockton with the Transcontinental Railroad, the city's vision as a trade and transportation hub began to materialize, except for one critical issue.
There were rather tortuous waterways leading from San Francisco to Stockton, weaving and turning through the islands. And because of hydraulic mining, there was a lot of sedimentation of these river areas, and so it was becoming rather shallow.
In addition, ships were getting larger with deeper drafts, leaving the river's shallow depth a barrier to ocean-going vessels. If the region was going to grow with the times, it had to tame the twisting passage through the delta. Even though no single individual gets credit for proposing a dredged shipping channel, it was Lieutenant Colonel Barton Stone Alexander who drew up the plan in 1870 that showed it was feasible.
They kind of choked at the projected $8 million price tag of such a ship canal. And so it continued to be a festering problem for the city of Stockton, being cut off from that ocean-going transportation.
Other countries hungered for California products, not just grains, nuts, and cotton, but manufactured goods too. The opportunity for trade was undeniable.
When a product moves and how it moves is all dependent on where the destination is. The ship behind me is actually loading rice that's going to Japan. Rice would not be able to get to Japan if it didn't use port facilities, because it doesn't make economic sense to ship the kind of tonnage that one ship can hold in another way, like say maybe in an aircraft.
Stockton's residents remained convinced their future lay in a navigable ship channel. So in 1925, they passed a $3 million bond toward its construction. The state and feds later added more funds that finally set the project in motion. Work began in 1930. Dredges began removing millions of cubic yards of river bottom. Clamshell dredges piled the mud and rock to make levees that formed the new channel, opening acres of delta islands for farmland. Despite the Great Depression and Hitler's rise in Germany, in Stockton, church bells rang and automobile horns blared. It was 1933, and more than 1,000 people celebrated the arrival of the Daisy Gray, the first deep draft vessel to arrive at Stockton's new port using the new channel. It was the start of a new era.
The local responsibility was to develop the facilities. So they developed the docks, the warehousing, the rail connection, many of which we're actually still using today. In my opinion, rail facilities are just as important to the success of a port as a dock.
Central California Traction Company has been in business for more than 100 years. We are a small railroad that basically does all the railroad switching on the Port of Stockton, and we're going all day long. We get rail cars from two major railroads, Burlington Northern and Union Pacific, and we get those cars, separate them all out, take them to the customers, let them unload them or load them, and then take them back and give them to those Class 1 railroads. The port is a busy place, and they've got ships coming in, they've got trucks coming in, and if we didn't have the railroad here, you wouldn't be able to get enough trucks in over the road infrastructure that they have.
When the United States mobilized to fight in World War II, Stockton's port facility became an integral part of the war effort. The United States Army took over the Port of Stockton, and it became the largest vehicle and parts consignment center in the entire United States. The harbor overflowed with 10,000 workers, loading merchant vessels and assembling as many as 125 ships for the war effort, from tugs to minesweepers.
In 1944, the United States Navy took over what was known as Rough and Ready Island and turned it into a naval complex. And the Navy held on to this area up until the year 2000, when Rough and Ready Island and all of its developments were turned over to the Port of Stockton.
Rough and Ready Island tripled the size of the port overnight. It added warehousing and open land that the Port of Stockton never had before. The acquisition really helped us to be able to provide additional space for tenants to develop their own projects.
Yara North America chose this location for its central location in the valley. We were able to lease a piece of the land here and build this facility and move our operation from another location that was less profitable and less convenient, so to speak. Keeps us competitive, keeps our costs down, and keeps us profitable, which is really what we're all about.
The presence of global companies reflects the port's role in world commerce. Cargo crossing the docks has grown 176% in less than 10 years, making the Port of Stockton the fourth busiest port in California.
I've seen the port get extremely busy. I was working when there would be maybe one ship every 2-3 weeks. Now we have 2-3 ships every day coming in. It's just booming.
While the port is responsive to world markets and international trade trends, it's also tied to the local community with a responsibility to its neighbors.
Today, the port supports more than 10,000 jobs, what I like to call family wage jobs, to become a major part of the economic foundation of Stockton and the greater San Joaquin County area. The port actually makes a major contribution through tax revenues that go into every facet of every service that's provided by the city of Stockton or San Joaquin County.
The port absolutely is part of the community. The waterway is not just only our ship channel. It is part of the Delta, it is part of the Pacific Flyway, it is a recreation area, it is a fishery. One of the latest commitments the port has made is we have joined the Green Marine program. It looks at how ports and how maritime operations are being handled to reduce your impacts on the environment. At Antioch Dunes National Wildlife Refuge, we are working to restore the habitat for 3 species by placing sand material that comes out of our dredging each year. It's been an extremely successful project. The owls were here when we took over Rough and Ready. You know, the rodents like to burrow holes in our levees, and we use the owls, the Air Force, if you want to call them, to come in and reduce the rodent population. This wonderful group, Puentes, came to us, and they wanted to develop a community garden. And we thought it was a wonderful idea.
We belong to a church in Sacramento, and a lot of the people are elderly and are really in need. So we thought once we start harvesting, we'll go and bless people so that way the people that can't get out, they'll have their fresh veggies delivered right to them. The power of one little seed to help people live more sustainable lives. Yeah, that's our goal.
It could be asked, what's a maritime port got to do with community gardening, or saving endangered species, or running a tiny service railroad, or any of a host of novel undertakings? It's being innovative, it's being responsive, it's being unique. But then, a bustling port 75 miles inland from the coast is unique. That's the Port of Stockton, cast in a different mold from its start as a gold rush depot upriver, doing what's needed to meet the challenges of its times, the responsibilities as a community leader, and embracing the prospects for a bright future.
Back in 2006, we started building and installing barn owl nest boxes to enhance the barn owl population here at the port.
We put cameras in the boxes, put the images up on our website. I think we had 40,000 hits on our website just on the owls in 1 month last year.
The public went absolutely crazy for it. We would post regular updates on the port's Facebook page, and we got many, many, many responses, lots of interested viewers. Absolutely beautiful animals. They've got a big white disc of their face that actually helps channel light and sound. So when they're out hunting at night, they are able to locate their prey. The islands here are all surrounded by levees. To maintain the integrity of those levees, it's pretty important that you keep rodents from burrowing and digging holes. These owls can eat up to 3,000 rodents in a single breeding season. So they're quite an effective method of rodent control. To our knowledge, we have increased the population quite a bit. This particular box behind me last year housed 7 owlets. They all survived to fledging, which is somewhat rare. A typical brood is more in the neighborhood of 4 or 5, but we have 16 of these boxes at the port, and so you do the math, there's a significant number of owlets being reared. I guess it's like the Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come, because they were here in short order, and this particular box has been in use every year since 2006.
The point of the Owl Box program is to reduce pesticide use, protect our levees, and in the meantime, now we've got a great project we can also share with the public that creates interaction.
The port wants to do everything they can to enhance the environment and support local wildlife.
In 1845, when Charles Weber acquired a 49,000-acre parcel from his luckless business partner in exchange for paying off his grocery bill, he couldn't have anticipated what awaited him 3 years later.
During the gold rush, Argonauts could come to Stockton en route to what were known as the southern mines. But the principal artery for transportation and the fastest way to travel was via water.
There was no Stockton in those early days. There was Charles Weber's tent town on the San Joaquin River that served as a jumping-off point for the gold fields.
He realized that the San Joaquin River was going to be the principal aid in developing his city, and Charles Weber was able to attract enough business people to establish hotels and restaurants and freight companies, and they would cater to the wants and needs of the miners. Those who did not make their fortune, in many instances, had been farmers in their previous lives. And coming back into Stockton or Sacramento, took a look around the Central Valley and realized there was great agricultural potential.
We're in San Joaquin County. This is the most productive agricultural area really in the world. You grow corn, wheat, almonds, walnuts, fruit, a whole host of different commodities feeding the world. You couldn't have the unique agricultural environment we have without the river. That is what allowed this state to turn from a gold mining state, if you will, to a food state.
California's Central Valley is blessed with the best soil there is. Back then, the problem was less about growing the food than it was getting it to market. Without a statewide railroad system or even decent roads, Stockton was in a strategic position to be a hub, connecting the valley by river to San Francisco.
From gold rush days, riverboats carried passengers and cargo on a daily basis between Stockton, Sacramento, and San Francisco.
With the Central Pacific Railroad's completion of a branch line in 1869, connecting Stockton with the Transcontinental Railroad, the city's vision as a trade and transportation hub began to materialize, except for one critical issue.
There were rather tortuous waterways leading from San Francisco to Stockton, weaving and turning through the islands. And because of hydraulic mining, there was a lot of sedimentation of these river areas, and so it was becoming rather shallow.
In addition, ships were getting larger with deeper drafts, leaving the river's shallow depth a barrier to ocean-going vessels. If the region was going to grow with the times, it had to tame the twisting passage through the delta. Even though no single individual gets credit for proposing a dredged shipping channel, it was Lieutenant Colonel Barton Stone Alexander who drew up the plan in 1870 that showed it was feasible.
They kind of choked at the projected $8 million price tag of such a ship canal. And so it continued to be a festering problem for the city of Stockton, being cut off from that ocean-going transportation.
Other countries hungered for California products, not just grains, nuts, and cotton, but manufactured goods too. The opportunity for trade was undeniable.
When a product moves and how it moves is all dependent on where the destination is. The ship behind me is actually loading rice that's going to Japan. Rice would not be able to get to Japan if it didn't use port facilities, because it doesn't make economic sense to ship the kind of tonnage that one ship can hold in another way, like say maybe in an aircraft.
Stockton's residents remained convinced their future lay in a navigable ship channel. So in 1925, they passed a $3 million bond toward its construction. The state and feds later added more funds that finally set the project in motion. Work began in 1930. Dredges began removing millions of cubic yards of river bottom. Clamshell dredges piled the mud and rock to make levees that formed the new channel, opening acres of delta islands for farmland. Despite the Great Depression and Hitler's rise in Germany, in Stockton, church bells rang and automobile horns blared. It was 1933, and more than 1,000 people celebrated the arrival of the Daisy Gray, the first deep draft vessel to arrive at Stockton's new port using the new channel. It was the start of a new era.
The local responsibility was to develop the facilities. So they developed the docks, the warehousing, the rail connection, many of which we're actually still using today. In my opinion, rail facilities are just as important to the success of a port as a dock.
Central California Traction Company has been in business for more than 100 years. We are a small railroad that basically does all the railroad switching on the Port of Stockton, and we're going all day long. We get rail cars from two major railroads, Burlington Northern and Union Pacific, and we get those cars, separate them all out, take them to the customers, let them unload them or load them, and then take them back and give them to those Class I railroads. The port is a busy place. They've got ships coming in, they've got trucks coming in, and if we didn't have the railroad here, you wouldn't be able to get enough trucks in over the road infrastructure that they have.
When the United States mobilized to fight in World War II, Stockton's port facility became an integral part of the war effort. The United States Army took over the Port of Stockton, and it became the largest vehicle and parts consignment center in the entire United States. The harbor overflowed with 10,000 workers, loading merchant vessels and assembling as many as 125 ships for the war effort, from tugs to minesweepers.
In 1944, the United States Navy took over what was known as Rough and Ready Island and turned it into a naval complex. And the Navy held on to this area up until the year 2000, when Rough and Ready Island and all of its developments were turned over to the Port of Stockton.
Rough and Ready Island tripled the size of the port overnight. It added warehousing and open land that the Port of Stockton never had before. The acquisition really helped us to be able to provide additional space for tenants to develop their own projects.
Yara North America chose this location for its central location in the valley. We were able to lease a piece of the land here and build this facility and move our operation from another location that was less profitable and less convenient, so to speak. Keeps us competitive, keeps our costs down, and keeps us profitable, which is really what we're all about.
The presence of global companies reflects the port's role in world commerce. Cargo crossing the docks has grown 176% in less than 10 years, making the Port of Stockton the fourth busiest port in California.
I've seen the port get extremely busy. I was working when there would be maybe one ship every 2-3 weeks. Now we have 2-3 ships every day coming in. It's just booming.
While the port is responsive to world markets and international trade trends, it's also tied to the local community with a responsibility to its neighbors.
Today, the port supports more than 10,000 jobs, what I like to call family wage jobs, to become a major part of the economic foundation of Stockton and the greater San Joaquin County area. The port actually makes a major contribution through tax revenues that go into every facet of every service that's provided by the city of Stockton or San Joaquin County.
The port absolutely is part of the community. The waterway is not just only our ship channel. It is part of the Delta, it is part of the Pacific Flyway, it is a recreation area, it is a fishery. One of the latest commitments the port has made is we have joined the Green Marine program. It looks at how ports and how maritime operations are being handled to reduce your impacts on the environment. At Antioch Dunes National Wildlife Refuge, we are working to restore the habitat for 3 species by placing sand material that comes out of our dredging each year. It's been an extremely successful project. The owls were here when we took over Rough and Ready. You know, the rodents like the burrow holes in our levees, and we use the owls, the Air Force, if you want to call them, to come in and reduce the rodent population. This wonderful group, Puentes, came to us, and they wanted to develop a community garden. And we thought it was a wonderful idea.
We belong to a church in Sacramento, and a lot of the people are elderly and are really in need. So we thought once we start harvesting, we'll go and bless people so that way the people that can't get out, they'll have their fresh veggies delivered right to them. The power of one little seed to help people live more sustainable lives. Yeah, that's our goal.
It could be asked, what's a maritime port got to do with community gardening, or saving endangered species, or running a tiny service railroad, or any of a host of novel undertakings? It's being innovative, it's being responsive, it's being unique. But then, a bustling port 75 miles inland from the coast is unique. That's the Port of Stockton, cast in a different mold from its start as a gold rush depot upriver, doing what's needed to meet the challenges of its times, the responsibilities as a community leader, and embracing the prospects for a bright future.
Back in 2006, we started building and installing barn owl nest boxes to enhance the barn owl population here at the port.
We put cameras in the boxes, put the images up on our website. I think we had 40,000 hits on our website just on the owls in 1 month last year.
The public went absolutely crazy for it. We would post regular updates on the port's Facebook page, and we got many, many, many responses, lots of interested viewers. Absolutely beautiful animals. They've got a big white disc of their face that actually helps channel light and sound. So when they're out hunting at night, they are able to locate their prey. The islands here are all surrounded by levees. To maintain the integrity of those levees, it's pretty important that you keep rodents from burrowing and digging holes. These owls can eat up to 3,000 rodents in a single breeding season. So they're quite an effective method of rodent control. To our knowledge, we have increased the population quite a bit. This particular box behind me last year housed 7 owlets. They all survived to fledging, which is somewhat rare. A typical brood is more in the neighborhood of 4 or 5, but we have 16 of these boxes at the port, and so you do the math, there's a significant number of owlets being reared. I guess it's like the Field of Dreams. Build it and they will come, because they were here in short order, and this particular box has been in use every year since 2006.
The point of the OwlBox program is to reduce pesticide use, protect our levees, and in the meantime, now we've got a great project we can also share with the public that creates interaction.
The port wants to do everything they can to enhance the environment and support local wildlife.
In 1845, when Charles Weber acquired a 49,000-acre parcel from his luckless business partner in exchange for paying off his grocery bill, he couldn't have anticipated what awaited him 3 years later.
During the gold rush, Argonauts could come to Stockton en route to what were known as the southern mines. But the principal artery for transportation and the fastest way to travel was via water.
There was no Stockton in those early days. There was Charles Weber's tent town on the San Joaquin River that served as a jumping-off point for the gold fields.
He realized that the San Joaquin River was going to be the principal aid in developing his city, and Charles Weber was able to attract enough business people to establish hotels and restaurants and freight companies, and they would cater to the wants and needs of the miners. Those who did not make their fortune, in many instances, had been farmers in their previous lives. And coming back into Stockton or Sacramento, took a look around the Central Valley and realized there was great agricultural potential.
We're in San Joaquin County. This is the most productive agricultural area really in the world. You grow corn, wheat, almonds, walnuts, fruit, a whole host of different commodities feeding the world. You couldn't have the unique agricultural environment we have without the river. That is what allowed this state to turn from a gold mining state, if you will, to a food state.
California's Central Valley is blessed with the best soil there is. Back then, the problem was less about growing the food than it was getting it to market. Without a statewide railroad system or even decent roads, Stockton was in a strategic position to be a hub, connecting the valley by river to San Francisco.
From gold rush days, riverboats carried passengers and cargo on a daily basis between Stockton, Sacramento, and San Francisco.
With the Central Pacific Railroad's completion of a branch line in 1869, connecting Stockton with the Transcontinental Railroad, the city's vision as a trade and transportation hub began to materialize, except for one critical issue.
There were rather tortuous waterways leading from San Francisco to Stockton, weaving and turning through the islands. And because of hydraulic mining, there was a lot of sedimentation of these river areas, and so it was becoming rather shallow.
In addition, ships were getting larger with deeper drafts, leaving the river's shallow depth a barrier to ocean-going vessels. If the region was going to grow with the times, it had to tame the twisting passage through the delta. Even though no single individual gets credit for proposing a dredged shipping channel, it was Lieutenant Colonel Barton Stone Alexander who drew up the plan in 1870 that showed it was feasible.
They kind of choked at the projected $8 million price tag of such a ship canal. And so it continued to be a festering problem for the city of Stockton, being cut off from that ocean-going transportation.
Other countries hungered for California products, not just grains, nuts, and cotton, but manufactured goods too. The opportunity for trade was undeniable.
When a product moves and how it moves is all dependent on where the destination is. The ship behind me is actually loading rice that's going to Japan. Rice would not be able to get to Japan if it didn't use port facilities, because it doesn't make economic sense to ship the kind of tonnage that one ship can hold in another way, like say maybe in an aircraft.
Stockton's residents remained convinced their future lay in a navigable ship channel. So in 1925, they passed a $3 million bond toward its construction. The state and feds later added more funds that finally set the project in motion. Work began in 1930. Dredges began removing millions of cubic yards of river bottom. Clamshell dredges piled the mud and rock to make levees that formed the new channel, opening acres of delta islands for farmland. Despite the Great Depression and Hitler's rise in Germany, in Stockton, church bells rang and automobile horns blared. It was 1933, and more than 1,000 people celebrated the arrival of the Daisy Gray, the first deep draft vessel to arrive at Stockton's new port using the new channel. It was the start of a new era.
The local responsibility was to develop the facilities. So they developed the docks, the warehousing, the rail connection, many of which we're actually still using today. In my opinion, rail facilities are just as important to the success of a port as a dock.
Central California Traction Company has been in business for more than 100 years. We are a small railroad that basically does all the railroad switching on the Port of Stockton, and we're going all day long. We get rail cars from two major railroads, Burlington Northern and Union Pacific, and we get those cars, separate them all out, take them to the customers, let them unload them or load them, and then take them back and give them to those Class 1 railroads. The port is a busy place. They've got ships coming in, they've got trucks coming in, and if we didn't have the railroad here, you wouldn't be able to get enough trucks in over the road infrastructure that they have.
When the United States mobilized to fight in World War II, Stockton's port facility became an integral part of the war effort. The United States Army took over the Port of Stockton, and it became the largest vehicle and parts consignment center in the entire United States. The harbor overflowed with 10,000 workers, loading merchant vessels and assembling as many as 125 ships for the war effort, from tugs to minesweepers.
In 1944, the United States Navy took over what was known as Rough and Ready Island and turned it into a naval complex. And the Navy held on to this area up until the year 2000, when Rough and Ready Island and all of its developments were turned over to the Port of Stockton.
Rough and Ready Island tripled the size of the port overnight. It added warehousing and open land that the Port of Stockton never had before. The acquisition really helped us to be able to provide additional space for tenants to develop their own projects.
Yara North America chose this location for its central location in the valley. We were able to lease a piece of the land here and build this facility and move our operation from another location that was less profitable and less convenient, so to speak. Keeps us competitive, keeps our costs down, and keeps us profitable, which is really what we're all about.
The presence of global companies reflects the port's role in world commerce. Cargo crossing the docks has grown 176% in less than 10 years, making the Port of Stockton the fourth busiest port in California.
I've seen the port get extremely busy. I was working when there would be maybe one ship every 2-3 weeks. Now we have 2-3 ships every day coming in. It's just booming.
While the port is responsive to world markets and international trade trends, it's also tied to the local community with a responsibility to its neighbors.
Today, the port supports more than 10,000 jobs, what I like to call family wage jobs, to become a major part of the economic foundation of Stockton and the greater San Joaquin County area. The port actually makes a major contribution through tax revenues that go into every facet of every service that's provided by the city of Stockton or San Joaquin County.
The port absolutely is part of the community. The waterway is not just only our ship channel. It is part of the Delta, it is part of the Pacific Flyway, it is a recreation area, it is a fishery. One of the latest commitments the port has made is we have joined the Green Marine program. It looks at how ports and how maritime operations are being handled to reduce your impacts on the environment. At Antioch Dunes National Wildlife Refuge, we are working to restore the habitat for 3 species by placing sand material that comes out of our dredging each year. It's been an extremely successful project. The owls were here when we took over Rough and Ready. You know, the rodents like to burrow holes in our levees, and we use the owls, the Air Force, if you want to call them, to come in and reduce the rodent population. This wonderful group, Puentes, came to us, and they wanted to develop a community garden. And we thought it was a wonderful idea.
We belong to a church in Sacramento, and a lot of the people are elderly and are really in need. So we thought once we start harvesting, we'll go and bless people so that way the people that can't get out, they'll have their fresh veggies delivered right to them. The power of one little seed to help people live more sustainable lives. Yeah, that's our goal.
It could be asked, what's a maritime port got to do with community gardening, or saving endangered species, or running a tiny service railroad, or any of a host of novel undertakings? It's being innovative, it's being responsive, it's being unique. But then, a bustling port 75 miles inland from the coast is unique. That's the Port of Stockton, cast in a different mold from its start as a gold rush depot upriver, doing what's needed to meet the challenges of its times, the responsibilities as a community leader, and embracing the prospects for a bright future.
Kidding, he hasn't packed yet?
Don't they wait for you when it's private, right?
Ready?
Go ahead.
And you guys are playing.
Thank you.
Okay. The Port Commission took no formal reportable action during the closed session just completed. Any other items?
Yes.
I know. For me, yes. Any other items that we need to talk about beyond that? Okay. Today's meeting will be adjourned in memory of retired Port Police Lieutenant Stephen Nichols. Wow. Stephen passed away in Sonora on March 14, 2025 at the age of 76. He was born on August 12, 1948 in Orange County. Prior to working at the port, Steve worked for the Fountain Valley Huntington Beach Police Department as an undercover officer in a biker gang division. Wow. Steve was hired on March 10, 1980 as a patrol officer. He was promoted to K-9 Division on January 2, 1985. He worked with his K-9 partner, Boone, for 7 years. During that time, he and Boone won numerous K-9 trials. Steve was promoted to Administrative Sergeant on July 1, 2002, and to Lieutenant on December 8, 2003. He retired on January 2, 2018. That's 38 years, folks. That's amazing. Steve enjoyed fishing in tournaments with his son-in-law Jim. Steve and his daughter Brandy and his granddaughter Allie loved going to Disneyland together, and his favorite ride was Pirates of the Caribbean. Allie was the light of Steve's life, and he was very proud of her. Those that knew Steve knew he was going to tell you a new joke when he pulled his folded paper out of his pocket. He is survived by his beloved wife Debbie, daughter Brandy, her husband Jim, and his granddaughter Allie. Not quite done yet. On behalf of the commissioners, port director, and staff, sincere sympathy and condolences are extended to the family of retired Port Police Lieutenant Stephen Nichols. Meeting is adjourned.